because history teaches us that Jesus was born in a region where the people had color. There's proof in the very Bible that you ask us to read in Revelation, 1st chapter, verse 14 and 15, that Jesus had hair like wool and feet the color of brass.
Just what are you saying?
I'm not saying anything. I'm proving to you that Jesus was not, and I might quote one of our Indian brothers, he was not a paleface.
Malcolm X is a film that came out in 1992 that's written and directed by Spike Lee. So Malcolm X is a $50 Patreon request that comes from The Oncoming Storm. And I gotta admit, I was quite surprised that he requested this film because Malcolm X is a film that you don't really hear get brought up in film discussion often. For me, it pretty much has never been brought up before. And Spike Lee is a filmmaker that has been brought up in many film discussions that I've had throughout my life, and still, this film has never been brought up. But Spike Lee is a bit of a blind spot for me because the only two films that I've seen from him are BlacKkKlansman and now Malcolm X. I know I've never seen Do the Right Thing. I understand that it's blasphemous. I put it in countless polls, but it just keeps losing, so it's out of my hands. At this point, you gotta blame your fellow Kino Lords. But obviously, Do the Right Thing is a film that I'm highly anticipating and have a lot of excitement for. But when it comes to Malcolm X, I feel like my opinion on a film like Malcolm X it just seems a little invaluable. I mean, it's not like my opinions are really all that valuable to begin with, but especially with a film like Malcolm X, because it's just one of those situations where it's like, don't care, didn't ask, plus you're white. I mean, I'm not fully white, I'm half white, half Mexican, but when people see me, they don't see Mexican, they see me as a white boy. But anyway, I'm here to give my opinion anyway, because The Oncoming Storm wanted me to. But after watching Malcolm X, I could say that this is a pretty damn solid film. I think there are many aspects of the film that are impressive and are worth appreciating. First of all, this is a pretty damn long film. This is a film that's 3 hours and 22 minutes long. So it's a pretty damn lengthy film. And honestly, I admire that for a lot of different reasons. One of them being the fact that, first of all, I gotta thank Oncoming Storm for sharing this documentary with me. But in the documentary that he shared, I learned that Spike Lee was dedicated to making this a long movie. He wanted this to be an over 3 hour movie because he felt that Malcolm X is such a complex character that went through so many different transformations that it's impossible to really give that kind of story justice in an hour and a half or even a 2 hour film. Just the fact that Spike Lee was actually able, at the end of the day, to get his way and have this film to be over 3 hours long, even with all the studio executives fighting against it, I mean, it's actually incredibly admirable. It's an accomplishment because, lengthy films like that, that's a huge risk for studios to take. And yet, if you have enough fight and you have enough passion, your vision can actually get accomplished. And I can only imagine the amount of pressure that man felt. Being a filmmaker already is a lot of pressure. Actually taking the hot seat and being responsible for a lot of things that go on set, plus the box office results and the reception of your film. I mean, the pressure of being a filmmaker already is pretty staggering. But on top of that pressure, you have to add on this gigantic weight of attempting to capture the life of this historically significant figure that a lot of people hold dear to them, and just making sure that your portrayal of this particular person, satisfies everybody. And I do gotta say, I think that is one of the strongest aspects of the film. I think that with the 3 hour runtime, Spike Lee does use it wisely. I think that the strength of this film is Spike Lee's ability to be able to portray and explore this historical figure that is incredibly complex. I think Spike Lee did an excellent job at portraying not only the life of Malcolm X, but portraying the philosophies that he held and the kind of maturation process of not only himself, but the philosophies and beliefs that he did preach. He was able to express these things, in a more nuanced way that didn't come off, one-dimensional and, in a way telling the audience how they should feel about this person. I found this to be the case for the film's entire runtime until perhaps the last 5 or 10 minutes of the film, but I'll get into that later. And I also appreciated the fact that there are noticeable stylistic choices throughout the film. I mean, it's not a flashy style or anything, but you can tell that there were some artistic liberties being taken that for the most part were pretty effective. I liked a lot of the rotating camera shots. I liked the choice of cross-cutting between timelines. And I also really liked the opening credits that show an American flag slowly burning. I mean, it's, pretty bold artistic choices that I think for the most part work well for the film. And also I thought that the actual opening shot to this film was pretty damn great because, I mean, to me, it seemed like a one-shot sequence, but within this one-shot sequence, it really establishes the period. You're immediately transported into a different era, and you're immediately getting comfortable with the main characters. And there's also this really effective scene in the film where you see Malcolm X giving one of his speeches, but at the same time, it's being contrasted with old footage of Martin Luther King giving his speeches. And I thought it was an interesting way to, again, kind of compare and contrast both civil rights leaders whose philosophies are compared, contrasted, and debated even till today. Because, obviously Martin Luther King was somebody who just wanted complete nonviolence, even if you're being attacked, show restraint, and, don't fight back. Malcolm X was, in a way, almost a complete opposite. He didn't tell people just to go out and start killing white people or anything. But, one of the famous taglines that he has was, by any means necessary. And I think in this film, it demonstrates very clearly in a country that is systemically against you and where essentially the majority of people hate you, you need to fight back in some way. Violence may be necessary in order to, achieve the end goal, which is a life of peace. But obviously that's really simplifying it. Both of their philosophies go a lot deeper than that. But what I thought this film was able to demonstrate incredibly well was how the ideology and religion of Islam can be very relatable and convincing for African Americans. Because a lot of it has to do with, not only forcing this religion on them historically, but also just the whitewashing of Christianity in general. But obviously, if you know what you're doing when it comes to brainwashing tactics, you can pretty much package and deliver anything in a convincing way, as long as you're targeting the insecurities and the holes of somebody that feels like need to be filled. But anyway, again, I felt like this film did a pretty damn good job at portraying the significant historical figure that is Malcolm X in a way that, again, feels nuanced, it feels well-rounded. And now let's talk about the actor that portrayed Malcolm X in this film, who is no other than Denzel Washington. He absolutely kills it in this film. He is such a talented actor. I'm convinced that there is nobody else that they could have picked that would have portrayed Malcolm X any better than Denzel Washington did. He brings his A game to every single scene. I just thought he was able to portray that passion and that energy and that level of articulation that Malcolm X had. So yeah, I feel like I don't really have to say much. Just everybody knows that Denzel Washington is a fantastic actor, and yes, he absolutely kills it here. And the assassination scene in this film, which is essentially the climax of the film, was a lot more brutal than I expected. It kind of shocked me, and especially for a PG-13 movie, caught me off guard. I was like, that is relentless. That is savagery. So in terms of criticisms that I had regarding this film, one of the things that did bother me quite a bit, and I know it seems like nitpicky and whatever, but to me, the score in this film, I just feel like is just really conventional, super Hollywood. It's overbearing, and almost every scene, maybe, with the exception of a few scenes, but for the vast majority of scenes where, you have that type of Hollywood orchestrated score, it just seems like it's constantly, trying to overly dramatize every situation. And it always seems like it's so set on desperately trying to tell the audience how to feel. And also we got to talk about the last 5 minutes or so of this film. Because, as I mentioned, the entire film I feel like does an excellent job and not necessarily like preaching to the audience and telling the audience how they should feel about Malcolm X. The final 5 minutes to this film is kind of the exception. And I understand that this is an actual eulogy from Ossie Davis, and the film literally has Ossie Davis reading his eulogy word for word that he read at Malcolm X's funeral. And, in a way, I do respect that, and it is interesting, but at the same time, I feel like it was also a way for Spike Lee to kind of communicate to people how he wants people to feel about Malcolm X. That's not to say that I don't think Ossie Davis's eulogy is well-spoken, well-written, and touching in a lot of different ways. I just feel like from a filmmaking perspective, it does feel like it goes against, everything that he accomplished up until that point. One last criticism that I will say about this film is that There are some flashback sequences. I mean, it doesn't happen often in this film, but when those flashback sequences happen, they felt oddly artificial. They felt very like Hollywood movie moment. And I think that's because of the way that the lines were delivered and just also the way some of it was written. Something about the production of those flashbacks, didn't seem nearly as authentic as, what we were getting, in present day of the film. But overall, like I said, I still think that this is a pretty damn impressive film. I mean, it has an amazing performance led by Denzel Washington. It has, effective stylistic choices. It achieved the Malcolm X exploration in a way that I felt was nuanced. So I'm going to give Malcolm X a strong 7 out of 10. It is worth a watch. I do think it's an important film in a lot of different ways. And I think it achieved what it wanted to achieve pretty damn well. But anyways, that's all I got to say about Malcolm X. If you really enjoyed what I had to say about the films, give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.